All right. So now we're going into part 6 of the AWS Security Specialty. We're going to find some interesting information here with questions, answers, and explanations. So we'll continue in a moment. All right. Let's begin. A company wants to remove all SSH keys permanently from a specific subset of its Amazon Linux 2 EC2 instances that are using the same IAM instance profile. However, the 3 individuals who have IAM user accounts will need to access these instances using an SSH session to perform critical duties. How can a security engineer provide the access to meet these requirements? Assign an IAM policy to the instance profile to allow EC2 to be managed by Systems Manager. Provide the IAM user accounts with permission to use Systems Manager. Remove the SSH keys from the EC2s. Use Systems Manager Session Manager to select the EC2 instances and connect. Systems Manager provides secure shell access without requiring SSH keys, inbound security groups, or bastion hosts. It provides full audit logging and session recording while eliminating traditional SSH security risks. A security engineer is using the AWS organizations and wants to optimize SCPs. The security engineer needs to ensure that the SCPs conform to best practices. Which approach should the engineer take to meet the requirements? Use IAM Access Analyzer to analyze the policies. View the findings from the policy validation checks. IAM Access Analyzer includes policy validation capabilities that check SCPs against best practices and identifies potential issues, providing recommendations for optimization and security improvements. A company is using AWS organizations to manage multiple accounts. The company needs to allow an IAM user to use a role to access resources that are in another organization's AWS account. What steps must be taken to meet this? Ensure the SDS assume role action is allowed by the SCPs of the organization that owns the resources that the IAM user needs to access, and create a role in the AWS account that contains the resources. Create an entry in the role's trust policy that allows the IAM user to assume the role. Attach the trust policy to the role. Cross-organization access requires both a trust relationship in the target account's role and ensuring the SCPs in the target organization don't block the assume role action from the external accounts. A company's CloudTrail logs are centrally stored in an S3 bucket. The security team controls the company's AWS account. The security team must prevent unauthorized access and tampering of the CloudTrail logs. What combination of steps should the team take? Configure server-side encryption with KMS managed encryption keys, and implement least privilege access to the S3 bucket by configuring a bucket policy, and configure CloudTrail log file integrity validation. This combination protects CloudTrail logs through encryption with SSE, KMS, access control through least privilege bucket policy, and integrity validation, cryptographic verification of log file and authenticity. Security engineer receives a note from the AWS abuse team about suspicious activity from a Linux-based EC2 using Amazon EBS-based storage. The instance is making connections to known malicious addresses. The instance is in a development account within a VPC in US East 1. The suspicious EC2 instance runs within the US East 1B subnet. During an investigation, a security engineer discovers that the suspicious instance is the only instance that runs in the subnet. What response will immediately mitigate the attack and help investigate the root cause? Update the outbound NACL for the subnet in US East 1B to explicitly deny all connections as the first rule. Replace the security group with a new security group that allows connections only from a diagnostic security group. Update the outbound NACL for the US East 1B subnet to remove the deny all rule. Launch a new EC2 instance that has diagnostic tools and assign the new security group to the new EC2. Use the new EC2 to investigate the suspicious instance. This approach immediately stops malicious communications through NACL rules, isolates the instance for investigation, while preserving evidence, and enables safe forensic analysis through controlled diagnostic environments. A security engineer receives alerts that an EC2 instance on a public subnet is under an SFTP brute force attack from a specific IP address, which is a known malicious bot. What should the security engineer do to block the malicious bot? Add a deny rule to the public VPC security group to block the malicious IP. Security groups provide stateful filtering at the instance level. Adding a deny rule for the specific malicious IP address immediately blocks all traffic from that source while maintaining access for legitimate users. A systems engineer deployed containers from several custom-built images that an application team provided through a QA workflow. The systems engineer used Amazon ECS with the Fargate launch type as the target platform. The systems engineer now needs to collect logs from all containers into an existing Amazon CloudWatch log group. What solution will meet this requirement? Turn on AWS Logs log driver by specifying parameters for AWS Logs group and AWS Logs region in the log configuration property. AWS Logs log driver is the standard method for sending container logs to CloudWatch logs in ECS. Configuring the log configuration with the appropriate log group and region parameters enables automatic log collection. A recent security audit found that CloudTrail logs are insufficiently protected from tampering and unauthorized access. What actions must the security engineer take to address these audit findings? Ensure CloudTrail log file validation is turned on and use an S3 bucket with tight access controls that exist in a separate account, and encrypt the CloudTrail log files with server-side encryption and KMS managed keys. These measures provide comprehensive protections. Log file validation prevents tampering, separate account storage prevents unauthorized access from the monitored account, and SSE KMS provides encryption with audit trails. Auditors for a healthcare company have mandated that all data volumes be encrypted at rest. Infrastructure is deployed mainly via CloudFormation. However, third-party frameworks and manual deployment are required on some legacy systems. What's the best way to monitor on a recurring basis whether EBS volumes are encrypted? Configure a config rule to run on a recurring basis for volume encryption. Config provides automated compliance monitoring with managed rules for EBS encryption. It can check all volumes across accounts and regions on a recurring schedule and provide compliance status and change notifications. A startup is using a single AWS account that has resources in a single region. A security engineer configures a CloudTrail trail in the same region to deliver log files to an S3 bucket using the CLI. Because of expansion, the company adds resources in multiple regions. The security engineer notices the logs from the new regions are not reaching the S3 bucket. What should the engineer do to fix this issue with least amount of operational overhead? Change the existing CloudTrail trail so that it applies to all regions. Modifying the existing trail to apply to all regions requires minimal operational overhead compared to creating new trails. This change automatically captures events from all current and future regions in a single trail. Security engineer creates an S3 bucket policy that denies access to all users. A few days later, the security engineer adds an additional statement to the bucket policy to allow read-only access to one other employee. Even after updating the policy, the employee still receives an access denied message. What's the cause of this denial? The allow permission is being overridden by the deny. In AWS policy evaluation, explicit deny statements always take precedence over allow statements. The initial deny all user statement cannot be overridden by a subsequent allow statement in the same policy. A company needs complete encryption of the traffic between external users and an application. The company hosts the application on a fleet of EC2 instances that run in an auto-scaling group behind a load balancer. How can a security engineer meet the requirements? Import a new third-party certificate into Certificate Manager, associate the certificate with the application load balancer, install the certificate on the EC2s. This configuration provides complete encryption by terminating TLS at the ALB with ACM managed certificates and re-encrypting the traffic to EC2 instances, ensuring end-to-end encryption throughout the connection path. While securing the connection between a company's VPC and its on-prem data center, a security engineer sent a ping command from an on-prem host, IP 203.0.113.12, to an Amazon EC2. IP 172.31.16.139, the ping command did not return a response. The flow log in the VPC showed that the request was accepted, but the response was rejected. What action should be performed to allow the ping to work? In the VPC's NACL, allow outbound ICMP traffic. The flow log shows the request was accepted, but the response was rejected, indicating the inbound ICMP is allowed, but the outbound ICMP response is blocked by the NACL, which requires explicit rules for both directions. What are the most secure ways to protect AWS account root users of a recently opened AWS account? Do not create access keys for the account root user. Instead, create an IAM user and enable multi-factor authentication for the account root user. These practices minimize root user exposure by avoiding programmatic access, so no access keys, and adding an additional authentication factor, MFA, while delegating regular operations to IAM users with appropriate permissions. A company is hosting a web application on an EC2 behind an application load balancer. The application has become a target of a DDoS attack. Application logging shows that requests are coming from a small number of client IP addresses, but the addresses change regularly. The company needs to block the malicious traffic with a solution that requires the least amount of effort. What solution meets the requests? Create a WAF-based rate-based rule and attach it to the load balancer. WAF rate-based rules automatically track requests rates from individual IPs and block traffic when thresholds are exceeded, providing dynamic protection against attacks with changing IP addresses without manual intervention. A company is building an application on AWS that will store sensitive information. The company's security engineer must introduce measures to protect the sensitive data against data breach while minimizing the management overhead. The credentials must be regularly rotated. What should the security engineer recommend? Enable RDS encryption to encrypt the database and snapshots. Enable EBS encryption on EC2s. Store the database credentials in Secrets Manager with automatic rotation. Set up TLS for the connection to the RDS hosted database. This solution provides defense in depth with encryption at rest, so RDS EBS, secure credential management with automatic rotations in Secrets Manager, and encryption in transit, TLS, minimizing operational overhead through automation. A company has an AWS account that hosts a production application. The company receives an email notification that GuardDuty has detected an impact IAM user anomalous behavior finding in the account. A security engineer needs to run the investigation playbook for the security incident and must collect and analyze the information without affecting the application. Which solution would meet these requirements most quickly? Log into the AWS account using read-only credentials. Review the GuardDuty finding to determine which API calls initiate the finding. Use Detective to review the API calls in context. Using read-only credentials prevents accidental changes, while Detective provides visual investigation capabilities with contextual analysis of GuardDuty findings, enabling rapid incident analysis without affecting production. The company wants to receive an email notification about critical findings in AWS Security Hub. The company doesn't have an existing architecture that supports this functionality. What solution will meet the requirement? Create an event bridge rule to detect critical security hub findings. Create an SNS topic as the target of the event bridge rule. Subscribe an email endpoint to the SNS topic to receive published messages. Event Bridge can automatically detect security hub findings based on severity levels, while SNS provides reliable email delivery. This serverless solution requires minimal infrastructure and provides immediate notifications for critical security findings. A security engineer is designing an IAM policy to protect AWS API operations. The policy must enforce multi-factor authentication for IAM users to access certain services in the AWS production account. Each session must remain valid for only 2 hours. Which combination of conditions must the security engineer add to the policy to meet the requirements? Bool AWS multi-factor auth present is true and numeric less than multi-factor age 7200. The AWS multi-factor auth present condition ensures MFA was used, while AWS multi-factor auth age limits session validity to 7200 seconds, which would be 2 hours, since MFA authentication enforcing both MFA requirement and session duration limits. The company uses AWS organizations and has a production workload across multiple AWS accounts. A security engineer needs to design a solution that will proactively monitor for suspicious behavior across all accounts that contain production workloads. The solution must automate remediation of incidents across the production accounts, publish notifications to an SNS topic when critical findings are detected, and send all security incident logs to a dedicated account. What solution will meet these requirements? Activate Amazon GuardDuty in each production account, and a dedicated logging account aggregate all GuardDuty logs from each production account. Remediate incidents by using EventBridge to invoke a custom Lambda function from GuardDuty findings. Configure the Lambda function to also publish notifications to SNS topics. GuardDuty provides comprehensive threat detection across all accounts. EventBridge enables automated response through Lambda functions that can both remediate threats and send notifications, while centralized logging ensures all security events are preserved in a dedicated account. A company is developing an e-commerce application that uses EC2s and an RDS MySQL database. For compliance reasons, data must be secured in transit and at rest. The company needs a solution that minimizes operational overhead and cost. Which solution meets these requirements? Use TLS certificates from Certificate Manager with an application load balancer. Deploy self-signed certificates on the EC2. Ensure that the database client software uses a TLS connection to RDS. Enable encryption of the RDS database instance. Enable encryption on the EBS volumes that support the EC2. This solution uses managed services, ACM for certificates, RDS encryption, EBS encryption, to minimize operational overhead while providing comprehensive encryption in transit, TLS, and at rest, RDS, EBS encryption at the lowest cost. The security engineer is working with the company to design an e-commerce application. The application will run on Amazon EC2s in an auto-scaling group behind a load balancer. The application will use an RDS database instance for its database. The only required connectivity from the internet is for HTTP and HTTPS traffic to the application. The application must communicate with an external payment provider that allows traffic only from a pre-configured allow list of IP addresses. The company must ensure that communications with the external payment provider are not interrupted as the environment scales. Which combination of actions should the security engineer do? Deploy a NAT gateway in each private subnet for every availability zone that is in use, and place the database instance in a private subnet, and configure the autoscaling group to place the EC2 instance in a private subnet. This architecture places compute and database resources in private subnets for security, while NAT gateways provide consistent static IP addresses for outbound connections to the payment provider, ensuring the allow list remains valid as instances scale. The company uses several CloudFormation stacks to handle the deployment of a suite of applications. The leader of the company's application development team notices that stack deployments fail with permission errors when some team members try to deploy the stacks. However, other team members can deploy the stacks successfully. All team members have permissions to perform operations on the stacks. Which combinations of steps ensure consistent deployment of stacks most securely? Create a service role that has cloudformation.amazonaws.com as the service principal. Configure the role to allow the STS assume role action, and update each stack to use the service role, and add a policy to each member role to allow the IAM pass role action. Set the policy's resource field to the ARN of the service role. A CloudFormation service role ensures consistent permissions for all deployments regardless of the user's individual permissions. Team members need IAM pass role permissions to use the service role, providing secure and consistent stack deployments. A company used a lift and shift approach to migrate from its on-prem data centers to the cloud. The company migrated on-prem VMs to EC2s. Now the company wants to replace some components running on EC2s with managed AWS services. Initially, the company will transition from load balancer software running on EC2s to elastic load balancers. A security engineer must ensure that after this transition, all load balancer logs are centralized and searchable for auditing, and metrics are generated to show which ciphers are in use. What solution does this? Create an S3 bucket, configure the load balancers to send logs to the S3 bucket. Use Athena to search the logs that are in the S3 bucket. Create Athena queries for the required metrics, and publish the metrics to CloudWatch. This solution provides cost-effective log storage in S3, powerful search capabilities through Athena SQL queries, and the ability to extract custom metrics like cipher usage and publish them to CloudWatch for monitoring and alerting. A company uses hundreds of AWS accounts in an organization and organizations. The company operates out of a single AWS region. The company has a dedicated security tooling AWS account in the organization. The security tooling account is configured as the org's delegated admin for GuardDuty and Security Hub. The company has configured the environment to automatically enable GuardDuty and Security Hub for existing AWS accounts and new AWS accounts. The company is performing control tests on specific GuardDuty findings to make sure the company's security team can detect and respond to security events. The security team launched an EC2 and attempted to run DNS requests against the test domain, like example.com, to generate a DNS finding. However, the GuardDuty finding was never created in Security Hub delegated administrator account. Why was the finding was not created in the Security Hub delegated admin account? The VPC, where the EC2 was launched, had the DHCP option configured for a custom OpenDNS resolver. GuardDuty DNS monitoring relies on analyzing DNS queries that go through the default VPC DNS resolver. When a VPC is configured with custom DNS resolvers like OpenDNS via DHCP options, DNS queries bypass the default resolver that GuardDuty monitors, preventing DNS-based findings from being generated. An e-commerce company has a web app architecture that runs primarily on containers. The application containers are deployed on ECS. The container images for the application are stored in ECR. The company's security team is performing an audit of components of the application architecture. The security team identifies issues with some container images that are stored in the container repos. The security team wants to address these issues by implementing continual scanning and on-push scanning of the container images. The security team needs to implement a solution that makes any findings from these scans visible in a centralized dashboard. The security team plans to use the dashboard to view these findings along with other security-related findings that they intend to generate in the future. There are specific repos that the security team needs to exclude from the scanning process. What solution will do this? Use Inspector. Create inclusion rules in ECR to match repos that need to be scanned. Push Inspector findings to Security Hub. Inspector provides enhanced container image scanning for ECR with both continual and on-push scanning capabilities. It integrates with Security Hub for centralized findings management and allows configuration of inclusion rules to selectively scan specific repos while excluding others. A company has a single AWS account and uses EC2s to test application code. The company recently discovered that the instance was compromised. The instance was serving up malware. The analysis of the instance showed that the instance was compromised 35 days ago. A security engineer must implement a continuous monitoring solution that automatically notifies the company's security team about compromised instances through an email distribution list for high severity findings. The security engineer must implement the solution as soon as possible. What steps should be taken to meet the requirements? Enable GuardDuty in the account, create an SNS topic, subscribe to security team's email distribution list to the topic, create an event bridge rule for GuardDuty findings of high severity, and configure the rule to publish a message to the topic. GuardDuty provides threat detection for compromised instances and malware. SNS handles email notifications to distribution lists, and event bridge rules can filter GuardDuty findings by severity level to trigger notifications only for high severity threats. A company is using AWS organizations to manage multiple AWS accounts for its human resources, finance, software development, and production environments. All the company's developers are part of the software development AWS account. And the company discovers that developers have launched EC2s that were pre-configured with software that the company has not approved for use. The company wants to implement a solution to ensure that developers can launch EC2s with only approved software applications and only in the software development account. What solution would do this? Use a service catalog portfolio that contains EC2 products with appropriate AMIs that include only approved software. Grant the developers permission to access only the service catalog portfolio to launch a product in the software development account. Service catalog provides a controlled environment for launching pre-approved resources. Creating a portfolio with EC2 products that using AMIs that contain only approved software and restricting developer access to only this catalog, the company ensures compliance while maintaining developer productivity. The company has enabled GuardDuty in all regions as part of its security monitoring strategy. In one of its VPCs, the company hosts an EC2 that works as an FTP server. A high number of clients from multiple locations contact the FTP. GuardDuty identifies this attack activity as a brute force attack because of the high number of connections that happen every hour. The company flagged the finding as a false positive, but GuardDuty continues to raise the issue. A security engineer must improve the signal to noise ratio without compromising the company's visibility of potential anomalous behavior. Which solution will meet these requirements? Create a suppression rule in GuardDuty to filter findings by automatically archiving new findings that match the specified criteria. GuardDuty suppression rules allow you to automatically archive findings that match specific criteria without disabling the underlying detection. This maintains security visibility while reducing noise from known false positives like legitimate high-volume FTP server activity. A company's security engineer has been tasked with restricting a contractor's IAM account access to the company's EC2 console without providing access to any other AWS services. The contractor's IAM account must not be able to gain access to any other AWS service, even if the IAM account is assigned additional permissions based on IAM group membership. What should the engineer do to make these requirements? Create an IAM permissions boundary policy that allows EC2 access. Associate the contractor's IAM account with the IAM permissions boundary. IAM permissions boundaries define maximum permissions that an identity-based policy can grant. Even if the contractor is added to groups with broader permissions, the permissions boundary ensures they cannot exceed EC2-only access, providing a strong security control. A company manages multiple AWS accounts using AWS organizations. The company's security team notices that some member accounts are not sending CloudTrail logs to a centralized S3 logging bucket. The security team wants to ensure there's at least one trail configured for all existing accounts and for any account that is created in the future. What actions should the security team implement to do this? Edit the existing trail in the organization's management account and apply it to the organization. Organization trails in AWS organizations automatically apply CloudTrail logging to all member accounts from the management account. This ensures consistent logging across the accounts, including future accounts, without requiring individual trail configuration in each account. The company recently had a security audit in which the auditors identified multiple potential threats. These potential threats can cause usage pattern changes such as DNS access peak, abnormal instance traffic, abnormal network interface traffic, and unusual S3 API calls. The threats can come from different sources and can occur at any time. The company needs to implement a solution to continuously monitor its systems and identify all these incoming threats in near real time. Which solution will meet these requirements? Enable GuardDuty from a centralized account. Use GuardDuty to manage CloudTrail logs, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs. GuardDuty provides a comprehensive threat detection by analyzing CloudTrail events, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs to identify suspicious activities like unusual API calls, traffic patterns, and DNS behavior. It operates in near real time and can be centrally managed across multiple accounts. A company is using IAM Identity Center, the single sign-on, to administer access to AWS accounts. A security engineer is creating a custom permission set in IAM Identity Center. The company will use the permission set across multiple accounts. An AWS managed policy and a customer managed policy are attached to the permission set. The security engineer has full admin permissions and is operating in the management account. When the security engineer attempts to assign the permission to an IAM Identity Center user who has access to multiple accounts, the assignment fails. What should the security engineer do to resolve this? Create the customer managed policy in every account where the permission set is assigned. Give the customer managed policy the same name and same permissions in each account. When using customer managed policies in IAM Identity Center, permission sets across multiple accounts, the policy must exist in each target account with the same name and permissions. AWS managed policies are automatically available, but customer managed policies must be replicated to each account. A company has thousands of AWS Lambda functions. While reviewing the Lambda functions, a security engineer discovers that sensitive information is being stored in environment variables and is viewable as plain text in the Lambda console. The values of the sensitive information are only a few characters long. What's the most cost-effective way to address this? Store the environment variables in AWS Systems Manager. Parameter store. Add secure string parameters and access them at runtime. Use IAM permissions to restrict access to the parameters to only the Lambda functions that require access. For short, sensitive values, Systems Manager Parameter Store with secure string parameters is the most cost-effective solution. It provides encryption at rest, fine-grained IAM access control, and no additional charges for standard parameters under the free tiers. A company has recently recovered from a security incident that required the restoration of EC2s from snapshots. The company uses a KMS customer managed key to encrypt all EBS snapshots. The company performs a gap analysis of its disaster recovery procedures and backup strategies. A security engineer needs to implement a solution so that the company can recover the EC2s if the account is compromised and the snapshots are deleted. What solution meets this? Create a new account that has limited privileges. Allow the new account to access the KMS key that encrypts the EBS snapshots. Copy the encrypted snapshots to the new account on a recurring basis. Creating a separate AWS account for backup storage provides isolation from the primary account. By granting the backup account access to the KMS key and regularly copying encrypted snapshots, the company can recover even if the primary account is compromised and snapshots are deleted. A company security engineer is designing an isolation procedure for EC2s as part of an incident response plan. The security engineer needs to isolate a target instance to block any traffic to and from the target instance, except for traffic from the company's forensic team. Each of the company's EC2s has its own dedicated security group. The EC2 are deployed in subnets of a VPC. A subnet can contain multiple instances. The security engineer is testing the procedure for EC2 isolation and opens an SSH session to the target instance. The procedure starts to simulate access to the target instance by an attacker. The security engineer removes the existing security group rules, then adds security group rules to the forensics team, access to the target instance on port 22. After these changes, the security engineer notices the SSH connection is still accessible, is still active and usable. When the security engineer runs a ping command to the public IP of the target instance, the ping is blocked. What should the engineer do to isolate the target instance? Remove the port 22 security group rule. Attach an instance role policy that allows systems manager sessions manager connections so that the forensics team can access the target instance. Existing SSH connections remain active even after security group changes because they use established TCP connections. To properly isolate the instance, remove the SSH action and use Sessions Manager, which doesn't require inbound network connections and can be controlled through IAM policies for forensic team and team access. A company has 5 AWS accounts and wants to use CloudTrail to log API calls. The log files must be stored in an S3 bucket that resides in a new account specifically built for centralized services with a unique top-level prefix for each trail. The configuration must also enable detection of any modification to the logs. What are the following steps to implement this? Create a new S3 bucket in a separate AWS account for centralized storage of CloudTrail logs. Enable log file validation on all trails. Apply a bucket policy to the new centralized S3 that permits the CloudTrail service to use the S3 put object action and the S3 get bucket echo action, and specify the appropriate resource arms for the CloudTrail logs or CloudTrail trails. Use unique log file prefixes for trails in each account. Centralized CloudTrail logging requires a properly configured S3 bucket policy allowing CloudTrail service access. Log file validation enables detection of modifications, and unique prefixes organize logs from different accounts in the centralized bucket. Security engineer is checking an AWS CloudFormation template for vulnerabilities. The security engineer finds a parameter that has a default value that exposes an application's API key in plain text. The parameter is referenced several times throughout the template. The security engineer must replace the parameter while maintaining the ability to reference the value in the template. What solution will meet these requirements in the most secure way? Store the API key in AWS Secrets Manager in the template. Replace all references to the value with Resolve Secrets Manager, MySecretID, Secret String. Secrets Manager is specifically designed for API keys and other sensitive credentials. CloudFormation's dynamic reference capability allows secure retrieval of secrets at deployment time without exposing them in template parameters, providing automatic rotation and fine-grained access control. A company has several petabytes of data. The company must preserve this data for 7 years to comply with regulatory requirements. The company's compliance team asks a security officer to develop a strategy that will prevent anyone from changing or deleting the data. What solution will meet this most cost effectively? Create a vault in S3 Glacier. Create a vault lock policy in S3 Glacier that meets all the regulatory requirements. Upload the data to the vault. S3 Glacier with Vault Lock provides the most cost-effective solution for long-term data preservation. Vault Lock creates immutable policies that prevent data deletion or modification, meeting compliance requirements while offering the lowest storage costs for archival data. A company has several workloads running on AWS. Employees are required to authenticate using on-prem ADFS, that's Active Directory Federated Services, and SSO to access the management console. Developers migrated an existing legacy web app to an EC2. Employees need to access this application from anywhere on the internet, but currently there's no authentication system built into the application. How should the security engineer implement employee-only access to the system without changing the application? Place the application behind an application load balancer. Use Cognito as authentication for the ALB. Define a SAML-based Cognito user pool and connect it to ADFS. The load balancer with Cognito authentication provides application-level access with control without modifying the application. Cognito user pools can integrate with ADFS via SAML, allowing employees to use existing corporate credentials while protecting the application with managed authentication. A company is using AWS to run a long-running analysis process on data that's stored in S3 buckets. The process runs on a fleet of EC2s that are in an auto-scaling group. The EC2 instances are deployed in a private subnet of a VPC that does not have internet access. The EC2s and the S3s are in the same AWS account. The EC2s access the S3 through an S3 gateway endpoint and has the default access policy. Each EC2 is associated with an instance profile that has a policy that explicitly allows the S3 get object action and the S3 put object action for only the required S3 buckets. The company learns that one or more of the EC2s are compromised and are exfiltrating data to an S3 bucket that is outside the company's org in AWS orgs. A security engineer must implement a solution to stop this exfiltration of data and keep the EC2 processing job functional. What solution will meet these requirements? Apply a service control policy on the AWS account to allow the S3 actions only if the values of AWS resource org ID and AWS principal org ID condition keys match the company's values. SCPs with resource org ID and principal org ID conditions prevent access to S3 resources outside the organization, effectively stopping data exfiltration while maintaining the legitimate access to internal buckets. This applies organization-wide controls that cannot be overridden by compromised instances. A company that operates in a hybrid cloud environment must meet strict compliance requirements. The company wants to create a report that includes evidence from on-prem workloads alongside evidence from AWS resources. A security engineer must implement a solution to collect, review, and manage evidence to demonstrate compliance with company policy. What solution meets these requirements? Create an assessment and audit manager from a pre-built framework or custom framework. Upload the manual evidence from the on-prem workloads. Add the evidence to the assessment. Generate an assessment report after Audit Manager collects the necessary evidence from AWS resources. Audit Manager is designed for compliance reporting and assessment management. It can automatically collect evidence from AWS resources while allowing manual evidence upload for on-prem workloads, providing a unified compliance reporting solution for hybrid environments. The company security team has defined a set of config rules that must be enforced globally in all AWS accounts the company owns. What should be done to provide a consolidated compliance overview for the security team? Use config aggregations and consolidate the views into one AWS account and provide role access to the security team. AWS config aggregation allows centralized viewing of compliance data from multiple accounts and regions. This provides the security team with a single pane of glass for monitoring compliance across all company AWS accounts without requiring individual account access. A security engineer is designing an incident response plan to address the risk of a compromised EC2. The plan must recommend a solution to meet the following requirements. A trusted forensic environment must be provisioned. Automated response processes must be orchestrated. What AWS services could be included? CloudFormation and step functions. CloudFormation enables rapid provisioning of trusted forensic environments with consistent configurations. Step functions orchestrates complex incident response workflows, coordinating multiple services and automating response processes for efficient, reliable incident handling. A security engineer has been tasked with implementing a solution that allows the company's development team to have interactive command line access to EC2 Linux instances using the AWS Management Console. What steps should the security engineer take to satisfy the requirement while maintaining least privilege? Enable Systems Manager in the Management Console and configure access to EC2s using the default Amazon EC2 role for SSM role. Install the Systems Manager agent on all EC2 Linux instances that need interactive access. Configure IAM user policies to allow development team access to the Systems Manager Sessions Manager and attach this to the team's IAM users. Sessions Manager provides a secure shell access through the AWS console without requiring SSH keys or open ports. Using the Amazon EC2 role for SSM role and restricting IAM permissions to Sessions Manager access follows least privilege principles while enabling the required functionality. A large government org is moving to the cloud and has specific encryption requirements. The first workload to move requires that a customer's data be immediately destroyed when the customer makes that request. The management has asked the security team to provide a solution that will securely store the data, allow only authorized applications to perform encryption and decryption, and allow for immediate destruction of the data. What solution will meet these requirements? Key Management Service and Cloud HSM Custom Key Store and create an HSM Custom Key Store, Use Cloud HSM to generate and store a new CMK for each customer. Cloud HSM Custom Key Stores with customer-specific CMKs enable immediate data destruction by deleting the encryption key. Cloud HSM provides FIPS 140-2 Level 3 validation required for government workloads and ensures that the key deletion makes encrypted data immediately and permanently inaccessible. Unapproved changes were previously made to a company's S3 bucket. A security engineer config to record configuration changes made to the company's S3s. The engineer discovers there are S3 configurations changes being made, but no SNS notifications are being sent. The engineer has already checked the configuration of the SNS topic and has confirmed that the configuration is valid. What steps does the engineer take to resolve this? Configure policies attached to S3s to allow config to record changes to the buckets. Assign the config role, AWS config role manage policy to the config role. AWS config requires proper IAM permissions via the AWS config role and S3 buckets that allow config to access and record bucket configurations. Without these permissions, config cannot detect changes and trigger SNS notifications. A company is operating an open source software platform that is internet facing. The legacy software platform will no longer receive security updates. The software platform operates using Route 53 weighted load balancing to send traffic to two EC2s that connect to a POS, or point of service, cluster. A report suggests that this software platform is vulnerable to SQL injection attacks, with samples of attacks provided. The company's security engineer must secure this system against SQL injection attacks within 24 hours. The engineer's solution must involve the least amount of effort and maintain normal operations during the implementations. What would be done? Create an application load balancer with the existing EC2 instance as a target group. Create a web ACL containing rules that protect the application from this attachment. Then apply it to the load balancer test to ensure its vulnerability has been mitigated. Then redirect the Route 53 records to point to the load balancer load balancer. Then update security groups on the EC2 instances to prevent direct access from the internet. WAF on a load balancer provides immediate SQL injection protection without modifying the legacy application. This maintains availability during implementation and offers comprehensive protection against web-based attacks while preserving the existing application architecture. A security engineer has noticed that VPC flow logs are getting a lot of reject traffic originating from a single EC2 and an auto-scaling group. The security engineer is concerned that this EC2 instance may be compromised. What immediate action should the engineer take? Remove the instance from the auto-scaling group. Close the security group ingress from only a single IP address, and then use that closed off IP in order to access the instance and assess it from a forensic perspective. So removing the instance from the auto-scaling group prevents it from being terminated. Restricting the security group to allow only for forensic access isolates it for investigation and preserves evidence. And further malicious activity. A company is collecting CloudTrail log data from multiple accounts by managing individual trails in each account and forwarding log data to a centralized S3 bucket in a log archive account. After CloudTrail introduced support for AWS organization trails, the company decided to further centralize management and automate deployment of CloudTrail logging capability across all its AWS accounts. The company's security engineer created an organizations trail in the master account, enabled server-side encryption with AWS KMS, managed keys for the log files, and specified the same bucket as the storage location. However, the engineer noticed the logs recorded by the new trail were not delivered to the bucket. What factors could cause this? The CMK key policy does not allow CloudTrail to make generate data key API calls against the key. The S3 bucket policy does not allow CloudTrail to make put object API calls against the folder created for the organization's trail. Organizations trails require specific KMS permissions, like generate data key, for encryption, and S3 bucket policies that account for the new folder structure created for organization-wide trails. The key policy and bucket policy must be updated to support the centralized trail configuration. The company has implemented centralized logging and monitoring of AWS CloudTrail logs from all regions in an S3. The log files are encrypted using KMS. A security engineer is attempting to review the log files using existing third-party tools hosted on EC2. The engineer is unable to access the logs in the S3 bucket and receives an access denied error. How would one fix this? Check the role of the EC2 instance profile that uses grants permissions to decrypt objects using the KMS CMK and gives access to the S3 bucket and objects. Third-party tools running on EC2s use the instance profile role for AWS API access. The role must have both S3 permissions like get object, put object, and KMS permissions like encrypt, decrypt to access encrypted CloudTrail logs stored in S3. The company has a VPC with several EC2s behind a NAT gateway. The company's security policy states that all network traffic must be logged and must include the original source and destination IP addresses. The existing VPC flow logs do not include this information. A security engineer needs to recommend a solution. What combination of steps should the engineer recommend? Delete and recreate the existing VPC flow logs. Change the log format of the VPC flow logs from the Amazon default format to a custom format. Include the packet source address and packet destination address fields in the log format. The default VPC flow log format shows translated IP addresses after NAT. To capture original source and destination IP addresses, you must use a custom log format with packet source address and packet destination address fields, which requires recreating the flow log since the format cannot be modified after creation. The company recently performed an annual security assessment of its AWS environment. The assessment showed that audit logs are not available beyond 90 days and that unauthorized changes to IAM policies are made without detection. How should an engineer resolve this? Create a CloudTrail trail that stores audit logs in S3. Configure a config rule to provide a notification when a policy change is made to resources. CloudTrail with S3 storage provides a long-term audit log retention beyond the default 90-day CloudWatch retention. Config rules can detect and alert IAM policy changes, providing real-time notification of unauthorized modifications. A company has several critical applications running on a large fleet of EC2s. As part of a security operations review, the company needs to apply critical operating system patches to EC2s within 24 hours of the patch becoming available from the operating system vendor. The company doesn't have a patching solution deployed on AWS, but has Systems Manager configured. What solution must also minimize administration overhead? What should a security engineer do to meet this? Use Systems Manager Patch Manager predefined baseline to patch affected instances. Systems Manager Patch Manager with predefined baselines provides automated patch deployment with minimal administrative overhead. Predefined baselines automatically include critical security patches and can be scheduled to meet the 24-hour requirement without manual intervention. A security engineer is asked to update an AWS CloudTrail log file prefix for an existing trail. When attempting to save the change in CloudTrail console, the security engineer receives the following error message: there's a problem with the bucket policy. What enables the security engineer to save the change? Update the existing bucket policy in the S3 console with the new log file prefix, and then update the log file prefix in the CloudTrail console. CloudTrail requires S3 bucket policies that specify the exact log file prefix path. When changing the prefix, the bucket policy must be updated first to include the new prefix before CloudTrail can be configured, ensuring CloudTrail has proper permissions to write to the new location. A rule set in the virtual appliance is correct. Which of the following are other valid items to troubleshoot in this scenario? Verify the security group, which security group is applied to the particular web server's elastic network interface, ENI. Verify the registered targets in the application load balancer. The security group configuration on the web server's ENI affects traffic flow, and the load balancer target registration determines which instances receive traffic. Both are critical components in the traffic path that can prevent proper operation even with correct virtual appliance rules. A web admin for the website example.com has created a CloudFront distribution for dev.example.com with a requirement to configure HTTPS using a custom TLS certificate imported to the certificate manager. What combination of steps is required to ensure availability of the certificate in CloudFront? Import the certificate in the US East 1 region and ensure the certificate, private key, and certificate chain are PEM encoded. CloudFront requires certificates to be in US East 1 due to its global nature, and certificates must be PEM encoded format for proper import and use with CloudFront distributions. A company's security engineer has been asked to monitor and report all account root user activities. Which of the following would enable the security engineer to monitor and report all root user activities? Create a CloudWatch events rule that will trigger when any API call from the root user is reported. Use SNS to notify the target group. CloudWatch events, now EventBridge, can filter CloudTrail events for root user activity using the user-identity.type field. SNS provides a notification mechanism to alert the security team when root user activities are detected. A company is building a data lake on S3. The data consists of millions of small files containing sensitive information. The security team has the following requirements for the architecture. Data must be encrypted in transit. Data must be encrypted at rest. The bucket must be private, but if the bucket is accidentally made public, the data must remain confidential. What steps would do this? Enable default encryption with server-side encryption with KMS managed keys on the S3 bucket. Add a bucket policy that includes a deny if a put object request does not include AWS Secure Transport. Add a bucket policy that includes a deny if a put object request does not include S3, X, AMZ, server-side encryption, AWS KMS. So SSE KMS provides encryption at rest with additional access controls. Secure transport conditions ensures encryption in transit by requiring HTTPS. The server-side encryption condition ensures all objects are encrypted even if the bucket becomes public, providing defense in depth. A recent security audit identified that a company's application team injects database credentials into the environment variables of a Fargate task. The company's security policy mandates that all sensitive data be encrypted at rest and in transit. What combination of actions should the security team take to make the application compliant with the policy? Create a secrets manager secret and specify the key value pairs to be stored in this secret. Modify the application to pull credentials from secrets manager instead of environment variables. Add the following statement to the execution role policy. And you'll see that role policy. It'll make sense. Secrets Manager provides encrypted storage for database credentials with automatic rotation capabilities. The execution role needs permissions to retrieve secrets, and the application must be modified to fetch credentials at runtime instead of using plain text environment variables. The company is designing a secure architecture for a global latency sensitive web application it plans to deploy to AWS. A security engineer needs to configure a highly available and secure two-tier architecture. The security design must include controls to prevent common attacks such as DDoS, cross-site scripting, and SQL injection. What solution does this? Create a load balancer that uses public subnets across multiple availability zones within a single region. Point the load balancer to an autoscaling group with Amazon EC2s and private subnets across multiple availability zones within the same region. Create a CloudFront distribution that uses the load balancer as its origin, and create appropriate AWS WAF ACLs and enable them on CloudFront distribution. CloudFront provides global distribution and DDoS protection, while WAF protects against application layer attacks like cross-site scripting and SQL injection. Load balancers in public subnets enables CloudFront connectivity, while EC2 instances in private subnets provide additional security isolation. The company is running an application on EC2 instances in an auto-scaling group. The application stores logs locally. A security engineer noticed the logs are lost after a scale-in event. The security engineer needs to recommend a solution to ensure the durability and availability of log data, and all logs must be kept for a minimum of 1 year for auditing purposes. What did the engineer recommend? Build CloudWatch agents into the AMI used in the auto-scaling group. Configure the CloudWatch agent to send the logs to CloudWatch logs for review. CloudWatch agent automatically streams logs to CloudWatch logs, ensuring they persist beyond the instance lifecycle. CloudWatch logs provides durable storage with configurable retention periods and integrates seamlessly with auto-scaling groups for automated log collection. The company has multiple production AWS accounts. Each account has AWS CloudTrail configured to log to a single S3 bucket in a central account. 2 of the production accounts have trails that are not logging anything to the bucket. What should be done to troubleshoot this? Verify the S3 bucket policy allows access for CloudTrail from the production AWS account IDs. Confirm in the CloudTrail console each trail is active and healthy. Confirm in the CloudTrail console the S3 bucket name is set correctly. Cross-account CloudTrail logging requires proper S3 bucket policies that explicitly allow CloudTrail from each production environment or account. Trail health, status, and correct S3 bucket configuration are essential for proper log delivery to the centralized logging account. The company has a website with a CloudFront HTTPS distribution, an application load balancer with multiple web instances for dynamic website content, and an S3 bucket for static website content. The company's security engineer recently updated the website security requirements. HTTPS needs to be enforced for all data in transit with specific ciphers. CloudFront distribution needs to be accessible from the internet only. What solution does this? Set up an S3 bucket policy with the AWS Secure Transport key. Configure the CloudFront origin access identity with the S3 bucket. Enforce the load balancer with an HTTPS listener only and select the appropriate security policy for the ciphers. AWS Secure Transport condition enforces HTTPS only access to S3. OAI ensures that only CloudFront can access S3 content, not direct internet access. And the application load balancer, HTTPS listeners with appropriate security policies enforce specific cipher requirements for dynamic content. A company is trying to replace its on-prem Bastion hosts used to access on-prem Linux servers with AWS Systems Manager Sessions Manager. A security engineer has installed the Systems Manager agent on all servers. The security engineer verifies that the agent is running on all servers, but Sessions Manager cannot connect to them. The security engineer needs to perform verification steps before Sessions Manager will work on the servers. What steps should the security engineer perform? Create a managed instance activation for the on-prem servers. Reconfigure the Systems Manager agent with the activation code and ID. Assign an IAM role to all of the on-prem servers. On-prem servers require managed instance activation to register with Systems Manager. The activation provides credentials for the SSM agent to communicate with AWS services. And the IAM roles provide the necessary permissions for Systems Manager functionality. A company recently recovered from a security incident that required the restoration of EC2s from snapshots. After performing a gap analysis of its disaster recovery procedures and backup strategies, the company is concerned that next time it will not be able to recover the EC2s if the account was compromised and EBS snapshots were deleted. All EBS snapshots are encrypted using an AWS KMS key, KMS CMK. What solution would solve this? Create a new account with limited privileges. Allow the new account to access the KMS key used to encrypt the EBS snapshots and copy the encrypted snapshots to the new account on a recurring basis. Cross-account snapshot copying provides isolation from the primary account that could be compromised. The backup account needs KMS key access to decrypt and re-encrypt snapshots during the copy process, ensuring recovery capability even if the primary account is compromised. A security engineer manages AWS organizations for a company. The engineer would like to restrict AWS usage to allow Amazon S3 only in one of the organizational units. The engineer adds a secure service control policy to the organizational unit, but it doesn't work as expected. What should the engineer do? Detach the default full AWS access service control policy. So SCPs work as guardrails that can only restrict permissions, not grant them. The default full AWS access SCP allows all services. To restrict access to only SC or S3, you must attach the full AWS SCP and create a custom SCP that explicitly allows only S3 actions. A company has a serverless application for internal users deployed on AWS. The application uses AWS Lambda for the front end and for business logic. The Lambda function accesses an Amazon RDS database inside the VPC. The company uses Systems Manager Parameter Store for storing database credentials. A recent security review highlighted security issues that need to be resolved. What combination of steps should the company take to resolve these security issues? Disable public access to the RDS database inside the VPC, move all the Lambda functions inside the VPC, create a VPC endpoint for Systems Manager, store the credentials as a secure string parameter. Moving the Lambda to VPC removes internet access while maintaining RDS connectivity. Disabling the RDS public access ensures database security. And VPC endpoints allow secure string parameter access without internet connectivity, encrypting the credentials at rest. A company has decided to migrate sensitive documents from on-prem data centers to S3. Currently, the hard drives are encrypted to meet a compliance requirement regarding data encryption. The CISO wants to improve security by encrypting each file using a different key instead of a single key. Using a different key would limit the security impact of a single exposed key. Which of the following requires the least amount of configuration when implementing this? Place all the files in the same S3 bucket. Use server-side encryption with the AWS KMS managed keys to encrypt the data. SSE KMS automatically generates a unique data encryption key for each object while requiring minimal configuration. This provides per object encryption with different keys, meeting the security requirement with the least operational overhead compared to client-side encryption solutions. A company hosts a web-based application that captures and stores sensitive data in a DynamoDB table. A security audit reveals the application does not provide end-to-end data protection or the ability to detect unauthorized data changes. The software engineer team needs to make changes that will address the audit findings. What set of steps should the software engineering team do? Use DynamoDB encryption client, use client-side encryption, and sign the table items. DynamoDB encryption client provides client-side encryption and digital signing capabilities, ensuring end-to-end data protection and the ability to detect unauthorized changes through cryptographic signatures, addressing both audit requirements. A company has a compliance requirement to rotate its encryption keys on an annual basis. A security engineer needs a process to rotate the KMS customer master keys that were created using imported key material. How can the engineer perform the key rotation process most efficiently? Create a new CMK. Redirect the existing key alias to the new CMK. CMKs with imported key material cannot use automatic rotation. Creating a new CMK and updating the alias provides seamless rotation for applications using the alias, as they automatically reference the new key without code changes. A company's developers plan to migrate their on-prem applications to Amazon EC2 instances using Amazon Linux AMIs. The applications are accessed by a group of partner companies. The security engineer needs to implement host-based security measures for these instances, block traffic from documented known bad IPs, and detect known software vulnerabilities and CIS benchmarks compliance. What solution addresses this? Launch the EC2 instance with an IAM role attached. Include a user data script that creates a cron job to periodically retrieve the list of bad IP addresses from S3 and configure IP tables on the instances blocking a list of bad IP addresses. Use Inspector to scan the instances for known software vulnerabilities and CIS benchmarks compliance. This service provides host-based security by using IP tables for IP blocking, and Inspector for vulnerability and compliance scanning. The automated approach with cron jobs and S3 stored IP lists ensures up-to-date threat blocking without manual intervention. A security engineer noticed an anomaly within a company EC2 instance. The engineer must now investigate what is causing the anomaly. What are the most effective steps to take to ensure that the instance is not further manipulated while allowing the engineer to understand what happened? Remove the instance from the auto scaling group and the elastic load balancer place within place the instance within an isolation security group. Make a copy of the EBS volume from a new snapshot, launch an EC2 instance with a forensic toolkit, and attach the copy of the EBS volume to investigate. This preserves the original evidence while creating a safe copy for analysis. Removing the autoscaling group prevents termination. Isolating the security group prevents network communication. And EBS snapshot copying allows for forensic analysis without affecting the original evidence. A security engineer needs to configure monitoring and auditing for AWS Lambda. Which combination of actions using AWS services should the engineer take to accomplish this? Use config to track configuration changes to Lambda functions, runtime environments, tags, handler names, code sizes, memory allocation, timeout settings, and concurrency settings, along with Lambda, IAM execution role, subnet, and security group associations. Use CloudTrail to implement governance, compliance, operational, and risk auditing for Lambda. Config tracks Lambda configuration changes and compliance, while CloudTrail logs API calls and function investigations. Together, they provide comprehensive monitoring and auditing capabilities for Lambda functions and their operational activities. A company has an AWS account and allows a third-party contractor who uses another AWS account, IAM role, uses another account to assume certain IAM roles. The company wants to ensure that IAM roles can be assumed by the contractor only if the contractor has multi-factor authentication enabled on their IAM user accounts. What should the company do to accomplish this? Add the following condition to the IAM policy attached to all IAM roles. Effect, deny, condition, bool if exists, AWS multi-factor auth present. False. The bool if exists condition with AWS multi-factor auth present set to false denies access when MFA is not present or the key doesn't exist. This ensures only users with active MFA sessions can assume the roles. A company uses Microsoft Active Directory for access management for on-prem resources and wants to use the same mechanism for accessing its AWS accounts. Additionally, the development team plans to launch a public-facing application for which they need a separate authentication solution. What combination would satisfy the requirements? Use Cognito user pools for application authentication. Use federated sign-in to AWS through Active Directory, federated service, and SAML, security assertion markup language. ADFS with SAML enables existing Active Directory users to access AWS accounts using their corporate credentials. Cognito user pools provide a separate, scalable authentication solution for the public-facing application without mixing corporate and customer identities. A company wants to encrypt data locally while meeting regulatory requirements related to key exhaustion. The encryption key can be no more than 10 days old or encrypt more than 10 to the 16th objects. Any encryption key must be generated on a FIPS-validated hardware security module, HSM. The company plans to upload an average of 100 objects to S3 each second for sustained operations across 5 data producers. What is the most efficient way to meet the company's needs? Use Cloud HSM to generate the master key and data keys. Then use Boto3 and Python to locally encrypt data before uploading the object. Rotate the data key every 10 days or after 2 to the 16th objects have been uploaded to Amazon S3. Cloud HSM provides FIPS 140-2 Level 3 validated HSMs for regulatory compliance. Local encryption with key rotation based on time and usage limits meets the key exhaustion requirements while maintaining high throughput for the specified workload. The company plans to use custom AMIs to launch EC2s across multiple AWS accounts in a single region to perform security monitoring and analytics tasks. The EC2s are launched in EC2 auto-scaling groups to increase the security of the solution. A security engineer will manage the lifecycle of the custom AMIs in a centralized account and will encrypt them with centrally managed AWS KMS CMK. The security engineer configured the KMS key policy to allow cross-account access. However, the EC2s are still not being properly launched by the EC2 auto-scaling groups. What combination of configuration steps should the engineer take to ensure the EC2 auto-scaling groups have been granted proper permissions to execute? Create a customer-managed CMK in a centralized account. Allow other applicable accounts to use that key for cryptographic operations by applying proper cross-account permissions in the key policy. Create an IAM role in all applicable accounts and configure its access key or its access policy with permissions to create grants for the centrally managed CMK. Use this IAM role to create a grant for the centrally managed CMK with permissions to perform cryptographic operations and with the EC2 autoscaling service linked role defined as the grantee principal. Autoscaling uses service-linked roles that need KMS grants for cross-account encrypted AMI access. Grants provide temporary, specific permissions without modifying the key policy, allowing the autoscaling service to decrypt AMIs during the instance launch. That is the end of part 6. We have a few more parts before we're done with the AWS Security Specialty question, answer, and explanation session. You'll see this in a few, but until then, hit like, subscribe, share. We'll talk to you soon.